much. I just want to welcome to the stage here, we have our film's directors, filmmaker and photo producer Zara Katz, and award-winning reporter and independent filmmaker Lisa Riordan Seville. Kristal Bush, who is the protagonist of the film that we just watched here today. Jolene Ross, who is a passionate advocate. Her partner, Byron Sr., has been in prison for nearly 23 years, and his scheduled release is not until 2034. And Jose D. Lenola, who is the Clemency campaign director for RAPP. So thank you all for being here, and if you all want to take a couple of minutes to introduce yourselves, thank you so much.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Kristal. I am the subject of the film. As you guys watched, I had a prison van service called Bridging the Gap Transportation, where I reunited over 3,500 families with their incarcerated loved ones. I did door-to-door service in Philadelphia to upstate Pennsylvania prisons. I visited about like 15 to 16 prisons out of the entire state. And yeah, I ended up adopting my nephew just based off of my own experience with my father being incarcerated.
Hi, I'm Jolene Ross. Some people might know me. I'm a pretty big advocate around here for anything prison related. And my partner, Brian, he's been inside way too long.
Jose D. Lenola, formerly incarcerated. I served 26 years, 18 of those in Attica, and was released a little over a year and a half ago.
Hi, I'm Zara Katz. I am one of the co-directors of the film. I work as a photo editor and photo producer, director of photography for news, editorial, documentary. And yeah, really happy to be here.
My name's Alisha Washington Seville, and I'm a journalist and filmmaker. I'm currently on the film team at ProPublica, an investigative reporting outlet based in New York. And I am with Zara, the co-director of this film. I thought maybe we'd take maybe just 5 minutes, and I'd love for you all to speak as folks who are directly impacted. One of our goals with the film was to create a conversation to talk about what it's like to be on the outside and on the inside, and kind of the synergistic and also challenging things that come with that. So, Kristal, would you start the conversation by asking someone else on the panel what you would most want to know about their experience?
Yeah, Jose, I would like to know, what was the support like while you were in the inside, as far as like with visitation or even just helping you just like carry that bid? Like, what was the support?
Yeah, so like many of the women on the video, I was shipped off upstate, as we call it, about 5 hours away from home. So I remember my family taking that long ride, and when I first went upstate. And because it was such a grueling process that I would, discourage them from coming up, because I know that the stuff that they would have to go through to just like take off from work all day, get up really early, and then the process of getting into the prison, dealing with the guards and security. And so it was really hard initially, and then I was transferred eventually closer to home, which created its own pressures, because now like I'm close to home, people could come up more often. And so it was, prisons are, in New York State prison system, you can have a visit for a good 5-6 hours, and at a table they have vending machines, and some places have a child area, but most places don't. No games or nothing. So you're there, and you really have an opportunity to connect with your family in a way that probably you don't when you're out, because you're just distracted with life. But like when you're doing long time, 10, 15, 20, 26 years, family pass away, I had 2 family members pass, very close, integral parts of the family. And life goes on, and so those visits slow down. The calls become a little less frequent. The letters become a little harder to write because you're just searching for things. But you do what you can to keep those ties. But it's definitely a challenge. Mm.
Do you have a question for someone?
Yeah, what would be, either one of you, what would you want your family or your partner, Jolene, to know inside about that process of just the coming up and the support that maybe they don't know or they don't appreciate as much?
Yeah, I'll start. I felt closer when my loved ones were in prison than when they were out. I think while they're inside, I think a good thing that I would want them to know is that we don't really talk about is just really just always like, what can you do for me? But it's just like in return, like while you're in there, you can still be, you know, helping out. Like my nephew, his father was rearrested, and he can still father his child. But I think he just think that because he's just in there, it's just so limited that he don't understand that impact. You know, he just turned 18 years old, and for like a whole month, I really just was like, and having these like panic attacks, these anxiety attacks, because now I have this young man, and I don't really know what to do next with him, and just. I wish I could just call and just say like, hey, like, I still need you to be, you know, that father figure for your child. So I think once they're in the inside, they just think that, you know, life is just over and we're just out in the free world just living life. But honestly, it really gets even harder once those resources and those loved ones go back in the inside. So we need even the extra support. I think sometimes they just think that, you know, we just got like, we're in a free world and everything is just free and we just got all this time, but we really don't, you know. Honestly, time really stops once they get re-released, or I mean, once they get back in prison. So yeah, just have some grace on us and you know, just really just continue to stay involved and stay connected with us outside of like what we can do for them.
Yeah, let me build on that a little bit, because what you said is super important about they're always a lot of times you're asked, what can you do for me? Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you be my legs? Can you be my secretary? Can you be this? And not realizing like they value us for us being able to be there for them, but we also, like you said, need them to be there for us. Like it took for us to have some really hard conversations. For Brian to learn how to be able to parent from prison. We had to get really, like we had to get inventive. We had to write to superintendents that never got a letter before to say, hey, can we bring homework on a visit so he can parent and help the kids with their schoolwork. We had to get special approval to bring certain materials on our family visits and be able to do these things. But once our mindset changed from waiting for him to come home to engaging in a life while he's there and really sharing our life together now, because he's got such a long sentence, and I know a lot of people are, especially in New York State, around our country, are sentenced to really long prison sentences. We can't let that stop us from living our lives. We can't wait until they come home. Like, we have to not only teach ourselves, but teach them as well how to live our best life right now.
Maybe we can open it up if anyone has any questions.
I'm Lavender. I have many questions and comments. So if anyone comes up after me and wants to take over, yeah. First of all, amazing film, incredible, very moving. Movies don't tend to really affect me in an emotional way, even documentaries, but I did actually tear up during this one, and my aunt always makes fun of me for not crying during movies, so she would really appreciate that. I have a few questions. One, how was the musical soundtrack created? How did that come about?
Thank you for asking, because it's one of, of the many difficult and challenging and, exciting parts of putting together a documentary. The music really matters and is a big conversation, and, music, it really affects what you feel and think, and so often there, it's kind of like a saying of like music being like wall-to-wall carpeting, where you don't even get space to like just be in it. So that was really important and really, really challenging. It's easy to say, I don't want this music, I don't want this music, I don't want this music, but it's very hard to get the sound you want. Thank our editors named Susanna Herbert, and also amazing documentary filmmaker, in her own right, and she had seen another documentary called MLK FBI, and the score had been composed by a jazz musician named Gerald Clayton, and she said, I think the sound is like pretty close to, so you start working with temp music. I mean, it's a whole thing, so you have to put stuff in there, but then you have to take it out. So we reached out to Gerald to see if he might be interested, and it was a really amazing collaboration to bring that in. There's another little part that actually you don't see, which is Kristal was a DJ in addition to being a van owner. She really curated those songs, and this is a bit nitty-gritty on how you make a film, but there is fair use and licensing and copyright, and you can't just use the songs in the background, or you have to be very specific in how you edit them. So that was, as much as we wish that there could have been all the Mary J. Blige songs that Kristal played, to
Not
set
in the budget.
Yes, set the film. We had to edit those out, but we wanted something that was authentic, and we also just wanted that natural space.
Yeah, I'm a musician, so I get it. You were able to keep the Mariah Carey Christmas at the beginning, though. Yeah, so that was cool.
We don't have major distribution. But there's a very specific way we did that. Like, it's chopped up if you listen to it carefully. And Gerald, who's brilliant, he composed something into it. So he composed this like kind of twinkle into the song, and then you drop in. But we had to do all these creative things to try and figure out how to even make it arguable that we could keep that song.
Awesome, thank you. A few more questions while no one's behind me. I loved how you edited the like phone shots over like the wide shots of the B-roll. How did you choose like which shots to overlay over which shots?
We did a bunch of experimentation. We had that idea for a long time. We knew Kristal's cell phone footage was going to be a really integral part of the film. And I think a lot of people these days are trying to figure that out with documentary, because like that's such a big part of our life, but obviously everyone knows it's vertical most of the time. So we knew we wanted to do some layering, and we kind of just A/B tested and played a lot. There's one with Nave that we ended up doing a concept, like all of them are sky shots of some kind, and we used a lot of that over and over, but it's kind of was just a little bit of playfulness about what felt like the right tone at any time.
Cool. And then a couple questions for those with a personal connection to the system. One is, do you feel like the times fit the crimes? And also, one thing that moved me in the film was, I think it was Kristal, you said, that it's not just like, how do I ask this? Like what you do to get out of jail, and like what happens out of jail, but staying out of jail and like this whole life, I forget how you phrased it, but it's important also what happens after that, and how to continue, how to continue life outside, on the outside. And so one question for the three of you is, what can people do to help the transition and prevent them from going back?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, I think our system needs to become more rehabilitative. You know, a lot of our men and women, yeah, they do some things, but in Pennsylvania, you know, life is life. And I think if we're working towards a more rehabilitative system, then we need to put the right services inside of the prisons as if these individuals will be released one day. I think it's not enough work that's being done that work towards individual as soon as they get inside. There's a lot of programs that are put in place that, you know, 2 years once they receive their green sheet to come home, or 6 months, or some reentry programs that's just waiting for them to be released. And I think that that's actually too late. I think we need to really put more services, even just services to heal our people while they're in the inside, as far as like yoga, meditation, you know, just different services that's really healing the people. Because when we think about it, you know, the violence that was committed, it really is a disease. And this is a public health crisis, and we need to treat it as that, as opposed to just putting them in these cages just for 20 to 40 years to even life, and then expecting them to come home and to everything being fine. I think that's the problem. So yeah, I think just more services inside of the prisons that are treating the individuals while they are inside, as opposed to just waiting for them to come home and expecting them to just be this great citizen that's just going to, you know, just keep that revolving door just going if we don't have those proper resources.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better than that. Genuinely, the models that we use in prisons in this country, in both PA and in New York, they have to change for real difference to be made. We put our people in prisons that are torturous. They're dungeons, and they're not, the rehabilitation that happens in there is from sheer human will. I know the other part of that is, your question was, what can we do to support our people while they're inside or when they're getting ready to come home? And it's to not wait until they're about to come home, or wait until that 2 years or that 6 months. Is this, when they go into prison, like, what do you, when you have a loved one that goes into prison and you know some, what do you expect them to do while they're in there? I really think it's important that we support that rehabilitation, that we talk about it right from the beginning. Like, you were sentenced to this much time, like, what are we gonna do with this time? Let's use it as an opportunity instead of looking at it like, you really have to just change the perspective on it, because the system's not gonna do it for you the way that it is right now. I mean, we're fighting for legislation. I know Jose works on legislation. I work on legislation with the Communities Not Cages bills to try to change those dynamics. But for the right now, we have to encourage our people to start as soon as they hit the ground in prison, and not just wait until they're within their release, or a short time within their release. And then to support them in that, and to bring yourself along on their rehabilitation, because a lot of times we glamorize a lifestyle that's not gonna support them when they come home. And it's important for us to roll with them and support their transformation.
Yeah, I agree with both of those answers are great. And so I'll add two different points. First one is that the sentences don't fit, because our sentencing structure is built off of a racist structure. So, you know, you can't, what is it working for, and what is it designed to do? And it's not designed to create healing. It's not designed to bring community. It's just further to uncage Black and brown people, and further, you know, a racist agenda that has been going on for a very, very long time. As far as reentry is concerned, I can go into a lot of areas, but I'll just go into one specifically, and if you want more information, we can talk later. I really believe that for everybody coming out, a service, mental health services should be provided, but the individuals that provide it need to have direct experience with incarceration. And preferably those who are formerly incarcerated, That's my opinion, because incarceration is such a unique phenomenon that it's very hard to have an adequate base to start a discussion from, especially if your mental health model is built off of suburban white males. Like, you're not going to get anywhere with that. So specific mental health providers that have a direct experience with incarceration. So if you know anybody that's interested in getting that field and that's formerly incarcerated, encourage them.
I must really compliment y'all on that. It was very good. You brought up a part in there where as coming out and going back in, and we as males, I'm speaking on the male part because I've never been a female a day in my life, we don't know the toll that we have on our family when we're inside. And for the family to stick with you through thick and thin and that, we have to take heed to that. Now on the other part, when we come home, what do we come home to? There's not a lot of opportunities out there for us. So what do we do as the people that are on the outside? What do we do to implement, to build a job or build access to their help so they don't have to go back? Because when they come home, first of all, they need a job. Nobody want to hire you. So what do we do to create jobs for them so they don't have to go back out and go back in jail? Also, it's like with community ties, based on community ties. What is our government or state or city doing to help us help them to get everything in order? Because as we know, it's corrupt. They'll lock you up. They'll give you parole. They'll give you probation, but they give you nothing to fall on. Your probation officer say, get a job. You out there look 10 jobs, but there's no job. They don't want to hire you. So I feel the probation officer or parole officer should have jobs already lined up for their inmates or people that's coming home. Okay, well, I got this job. You can do this temporarily, or find out where their educational status are. Some people could be counselors. Well, they've been in there that long where they didn't get their education. But where do they step into that frame? So how can we do that to help?
I can give you a small answer here in New York. Here in New York, there's a temporary release program that's been diminished down to next to nothing. And if that could be bolstered, it would change the way a person comes home. So they're able to get a leg up on their release. And not just for a person that did a low-level crime. Any person coming home should have access to that program. In New York State, they cut it out for anyone that's got a violent crime. And that includes if you had a violent crime 2-3 bids ago. So I think that's something that we could write to our governor, because honestly, the only person, it's done by an executive order here in New York. And if they would eliminate executive order number 9, that would change that dynamic and allow people to start participating in that program. So that's a small answer here in New York, but on a larger scale, like I had mentioned before, family members have a really important role in a person coming home in trying to start that, where you're trying to find places that might hire them, or you start going around talking to other people that have come home and then connecting folks with those resources, either to start writing them before you get out or to have them lined up like these are the first 5 places you should go within the first couple little bit that you're home with. So the family members are a huge resource in that.
Where can I buy the film at?
Buy the film at?
Just a reminder to come to the mic if you have a question.
The film isn't available yet widely, but you can hold community screenings or educational screenings through Women Make Movies, which is our distributor. So we can give you more information about that.
Okay, because
Yeah.
exactly, we need more bases like that.
Thank you for answering your question.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. So Kristal and Jolene said the same thing. rehabilitation. Like, people need to understand that prison is not a rehabilitative source, and also understand that most people who go into prison are not rehabilitated at all. So we go into prison and we have to learn these things. So I was incarcerated since the age of 16. I did 25 years. And those things I had to learn on my own. Prison doesn't show you that. Prison is an abnormal environment that only teaches you bad behavior and worse behavior. So we have to learn these things inside. And I was a person who didn't have the family support for like 20 years. I did 20 years without any family support. So that takes a toll. But for y'all to capture that moment, that feeling that Jolene go through, that Kristal went through, is amazing. I've seen a lot of prison films and I never felt that aspect. Y'all really keyed down on it, and y'all actually showed a process that most people are unfamiliar with, because that's the most important part. You know, I used to get mad with people in prison, like they get mad at their family because they couldn't come on time, they couldn't bring a certain package. I used to be upset, like, you better be lucky you have that. And most people, like I said, it's not, they don't recognize it, and they don't understand it because they're so busy trying to survive in the abnormal environment themselves. So y'all can't really be too upset, because you have to understand what they have to deal with also in there. They dehumanized, and we are no longer people, we objects. So therefore, the understanding of a human aspect or human trait, we lose that. And so that's why we don't understand what our families go through, because we don't even understand ourselves at that moment. And it's great for y'all to, you know, be there and support the family, because it's important. Most prisons, when they learn you don't have families, they do what they want with you. They move you around forever, they tear up your stuff, do what they want, because you ain't got nobody to complain for you. You can't complain for yourself. Your families do that. And one aspect I really want to hold on to is the letters that your father brought home or had still. Those are important. Like, a letter to a person in prison means the world. Like, I get a letter, I'll hold it. So anytime I feel bad, read the letter over and over, and each day was something new. And that's why you see he brought those home, because those are the memories he had. And for that purpose, that little key that y'all showed is so important, because it humanizes the person again. And that's why I want to thank all of y'all. RAPP does a lot of things too, so I'm a part of RAPP, so I know what you do, right? But that's important, to keep the word out, keep people and keep society understanding. Those are humans doing it. Our society is telling us those are outcasts, outliers. We shouldn't care about them. And this is what majority of our society started to do. But a new day has come, and people becoming awakened now. And so therefore we start to realize that human traits back on those people, and help by the film, and help with understanding the things that y'all do. It brings the human side back to people and give them that notion to keep driving and keep surviving and keep their goals. And I thank all of y'all.
You're the first person I ever heard use habilitation other than Brian. He always says that it's hard for him to be rehabilitated because he was never habilitated. So I respect your point of view. Because I always said, that's not a word, you can't use it. But here you are. And it's being used beautifully, and it means exactly the same thing, is that a lot of people never got a first chance. So when I talk about Second Look Act, a lot of people are saying, how am I gonna get a second look when I never got a first look? So a lot of people are sitting in prison for exactly that reason, because they weren't taught the right skills from the beginning. And then that was criminalized. And then maybe they had mental health problems, and that was criminalized. And there wasn't resources in the community, so that was criminalized. So you're on the right path.
Hello, everybody. Sorry I missed the workshop. I really wanted to be here, but it's Ramadan, so I'm a little slow. So I do activism work with children, and so when you mentioned about adopting your nephew, it was very hard to hear, because I know firsthand that parents who are not in prison lose their children on a regular basis for job insecurity, for postpartum depression, for the mislabeling of mental health. And so when I heard you mention about health and getting psychiatric treatment, or just various things, it concerns me, because the state has a very strong grasp on their definitions of mental health. And just by the labeling of being not well, you can find yourself in a very dangerous position. So what are some of the ways that, I hear that I watch a lot of things with Angela Davis because she's a longtime prison activist. And she was just mentioning that the term carceral system, it took a long time for it to take hold and people to really grasp. We're talking about corporations. So people mention a lot of times, like, let's go to legislations, let's go to governors. But we're really dealing with corporations. And I hear that there's a lot of creativity happening in prison. But what are we thinking of or imagining in a creative way, because I'm an artist as well, to deal with these really dangerous, dangerous corporations that are really killing our citizens? Thank you.
Jose, you're doing some imagining. How are you guys at RAPP? Will you tell us just a really brief of what RAPP is, and maybe?
Certainly. So RAPP, Release Aging People in Prison, is a grassroots advocacy organization who was started by 3 formerly incarcerated people. We center directly in the strategic planning and membership directly impacted families and formerly incarcerated people. We don't believe in carve-outs in anything of legislators. We don't believe throwing people under the bus. And we certainly believe in not allying with people who support mass incarceration. And so, that's a great question that I think we've been struggling with. Everybody has that is in this work. And so to imagine what it looks like, and I think, one way I imagine it to look like is that that we as communities find ways to build in a structure to bring in healing first, and however that looks for each community. I can't tell you what community each community needs. And stop relying on these prepackaged, beautifully developed programs that are developed by corporations to make money, to so-called provide healing and like restorative practices or other things that they want to label it. So really develop models that are unique to our own environments. And so that, that's one way. And so one specific way RAPP has been doing that has really been trying to connect with families on the ground and provide those reentry services, but also look at like, what are some key things that families need to be able to just have an opportunity to sit down and talk and have healing moments with their neighbor and themselves. And it's different for each family, but that's one thing we can do is just stop relying on corporations for answers and go to our communities. And and also stop investing in their beautifully polished programs.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how many of the programs in prison, the ones that work really well, were built and created by people in prison. And like you said earlier about mental health, like it's the people that are closest, we've said this, a lot of people have said this a lot of different ways, but people that are closest to the problem are closest, they know the solution. So I know like Brian has come up with 100 different curriculums in prison, and he applies them individually. So when he mentors a person, he's going to find out what they need and create their goals around that. And that's in mental health now, like the person had asked the question, like they think they're going to put you in a box, and if you don't fit in that box, you get stigmatized. And unfortunately, people in prison understand this just as well as people dealing with mental health issues. Stigma is very real, and if you're outside of the norm, it makes it very difficult to feel heard, to feel seen. But when you find your community, like I started with RAPP, and I am now with Center for Community Alternatives. When you find that community that really understands you and sees you, it changes your life. It truly does. So don't think that there's not that community out there that's going to hear you and see you. They're out there, and just keep looking for them.
Kristal, maybe, the first part of the question or the comment was about child welfare, and, you really saw all the sides, as a social worker during the time, working directly with children who were sometimes getting taken away from their parents and trying to work towards that, and then you dealing with it in your own personal way, and maybe if you just had any insight into how sticky and
Yeah, I know in PA they have a it's part of the foster care system, but it's called kinship care. And a lot of people don't know about kinship care because, you know, we're just told that if you call DHS, your child is going to be removed and they're never coming back. But it took for me to be a social worker for me to really understand what kinship care was. And Pennsylvania has a fund for family members who decides to care for children as opposed to placing these children in like other placements or other facilities. So I would just really just recommend that, you know, just different family members. A lot of these children are dealing with parents that are incarcerated or don't have all of the resources to really just start caring for those children and, you know, start making the phone calls to the Department of Human Services and saying like, hey, I'm caring for a child and I need support. And it took me years to really get the support that I needed for my nephew, but I was able to get that support and I still receive that support and I'm able to care for him. But just to add on to what everyone else was saying, this problem, like, you know, our country spends millions and billions of dollars for this problem, and it's a lot of individual, like, organizations, and there was even moments where I just felt like even bridging the gap wasn't even solving a problem just because we weren't receiving a lot of the resources that we needed. You know, the visits, you know, was one thing, but it was so many different aspects that my service was missing that I just wanted to stop. Like, I can't do this anymore because, you know, you just start feeling like you're just feeding this system and you're not really solving a problem. And one of the things is we really need to just come together. All these different organizations really need to come together as one unified language and start addressing all of the issues, whether it's on the foster care system to the reentry system to, you know, as soon as a person get incarcerated, like these systems really need to work hand in hand under one unified language. Or else we're all going to be just fighting for these dollars and really kind of like missing a point. And that's what I'm starting to see, or that's what I've been seeing. Even when I was running my own service, it was moments where it was just like, yeah, I'm doing door-to-door service, you know, my vans are filled up and, you know, the business is booming. But then I also questioned if I was even solving a problem because I was missing so many of the aspects. You know, I was missing the children that's in foster care system. I was missing, I didn't even have the right structure in place to guide the women who wrote my service to have the right questions to ask their loved ones. It was just more so like, girl, get on this van, go see him. So a lot of structure needs to be put in place. And I think if all of these organizations really just come together under one unified organization and language, I think that will really strengthen. You got to think this organization, I mean, our country really just put billions of dollars into this system, and it's going to take so much work for us to really dismantle that.
One thing that was really important to the three of us making this film was that there's a statistic, an estimate that 1 in 4 women have had an incarcerated loved one or close family member. That's a quarter of women in this country. You know, you have 2 million people at a time, people going through jail, like that's a lot of people. And that means that's like, you know, that's also a voting block. That's also a like community with a shared interest, you know? And so we're journalists, like we're not organizers, but when I see that, I'm like, it's really hard to come together to find solutions, you know? Everyone has different facets of it. But when you think about what collective power can come if we actually thought about the people inside as community members who are gone and coming back even with long bids, and most people have shorter bids, you know? And if that were, it's also like your tax dollars at work in that facility. It's tax dollars that, you know, pay for jobs, it's tax dollars that pay for food, it's tax dollars that pay, and And those are your tax dollars that you can decide to work in other ways. And so I think, you know, the conversations that happen at RAPP and CAC and like all of these groups, you know, this is a potential power if people want to get together to use it. And I don't have the solution of how to use it, but, you know, as a journalist, I like a statistic, and that's just 1 in 4 women, right? There's also men, there's also people who have been inside, there's also families. Those kids go to school. Those tax dollars pay for their school. The kids who go to like, are there resources in school to help these children? You know, are those resources, can they go to community members and not to the foster care, you know, industrial complex? Like, these are all questions that I have, so.
And sorry, I would just like to add on to the young woman. I didn't catch your name, sorry, with the glass.
Kristal.
Kristal. I think that one thing that people should understand about the kinship system is that a lot of the courts are really, they're really aggressive in not applying the policies. So you find a lot of parents in distress and completely lost in the welfare system. And just to give you a little bit of background about me, I had a personal situation, and I was just in a courthouse, and I decided to roam around. And I sat in a custody, not a custody, CPS hearing. And it was involving a woman whose landlord called CPS on her because her ex-husband was around her and there was domestic violence. And we know domestic violence doesn't work neatly. When a relationship ends after 20 years, it's not going to be perfect. But people don't realize that the court has, in their efforts to give women their rights, as they say, limited women, and basically instructed them who they can be with, how they can be with them, their sexual lives, their religious lives, their economic lives. And so I think that is really important for people to know, just like the prison system is really diabolical and wicked, the foster care system is on the same platform. And there are a lot of organizations not trying to reform, but abolish the foster system, like upend. And just one statistic, since you like statistics, 1/3 of all children in foster care is due just to housing insecurity. And is really just a vicious cycle. And I look forward to the day when people really understand what's happening to children, 500,000 children in foster care. And we are dealing with such atrocities, more things I have seen in the last 3 years that I would ever wish anyone to see. So inshallah, just like you're bringing a conversation about prisons, may there be like peace for the people in prison and peace for the very many children in this country who desperately need our eyes on what's happening to them. Thank you all for like making this documentary and bringing this to Troy.
Yeah. That foster care system definitely feeds the prison system as well. I remember doing an internship at a girls' home here in, it's a St. Anne's, which is known for behavioral issues for young girls. And when I was doing my internship, I read through their case notes, and 9 out of every 10 girls were there because they were abused so badly that they couldn't go back to their homes. And it's not that they didn't want to be in their homes, it's that there are systems and structures that are in place wouldn't allow that. So they end up going, because they're so badly traumatized, they end up going into these homes that they end up going into the foster care system afterwards because they're taken out of whatever home that they, they were birthed into. And our systems are broken all along the way, and it feeds into our prison systems. This isn't this way by mistake. It's a very intricate design that was created to be able to keep those prison systems fed, to continue making money, and what used to be farming communities are now prison communities.
Yeah, and to add, it took me, I don't know, how many years did it take for me to adopt my nephew? Probably like the entire, the 6 years that we had.
Yeah, I think you were working on it for like eight years.
Yeah, it took me about 6 to 8 years to really adopt my nephew. And the reason why I understood the system so well is because I was a social worker. Not too many people, have the opportunity to see the foster care system from behind the scenes. And I had those relationships with the judges and the lawyers, but it still was not an easy task. Like, I had one situation where a worker came out and my smoke detectors was beeping, and I checked my emails and they wanted to remove my nephew from my care over smoke detectors. So just really just going that extra mile and just advocating, for that child. The foster care system is really no different than the prison system, but we still gotta really advocate for those children because it's designed for them to enter into that system and then go into the prison system. So we gotta work extra hard.
And that, the structure of the film and the reality of Kristal's life was, that parole is surveillance, and you hear her talk about that, with her dad, when he does have to go back, they're just watching you. And while this wasn't explicitly said in the film, that day, adoption day, we were there and we were filming, and afterwards, both Kristal and Nave, okay, they're not watching us anymore. We can take a breath, and yeah, how real that is. And but it's still always there, right? Anybody could call, and yeah, it's just such a surveillance state, between prison and foster care. And yeah,
I remember when I was watching the film, I was so petrified when they raided the house, because I was like, oh no, they're gonna take the kid, they're gonna. I remember thinking that, and that's things like that happen. Here in New York, the Child Protective Services and the Department of Social Services, they run through your rights while you're in the worst parts of your life, the most chaotic, the most traumatic parts of your life you're going through, and at the same time, the family courts are trying to take your kids from you, and they run through your rights in such a short period of time because that's their mandate. And they're just churning paperwork. They're not looking at families. And, the same way that a person is hunted on parole is very similar to the way that families are hunted during either child protective cases or neglect and child abuse cases.
Hi again. Kristal, could you talk about your decision to stop the van service and what you're doing now? And also, I guess, to anyone, have you noticed any progress since the release of the film?
The release of? The film. Okay. Yeah, so I decided to stop the van service, one, because I needed the healing. I started this back in 2011, 2012. And it really just was like this revolving door. And my business was scaling, but I just felt like once the men in my family came home, it just really didn't serve the same purpose anymore. I would ride up to the prisons, and while everyone is in the inside, I would cry. That was really the moment where it was a shock to me, where it was just like, this prison, this place here is what really broke up my family. So the van service just didn't serve its same purpose anymore. Whereas before it was, my loved ones were in the inside, my dad and my brother. So each prison that I was going to, I was able to take other people up and then visit my own loved ones. But once they came home, it was something where I needed to just put the prisons behind me. And just work on that relationship with them outside of prison. So that was one of the reasons as to why I decided to stop the van service. And then since the film was released, I don't know, I just really been, this entire year, just been taking it all in. I think things just was happening so fast. Just the thought of having a documentary, when we launched at South by Southwest, it was like, oh, we got a documentary. I didn't really think that we would ever have a documentary. So really just taking the time to just take it in. Each time that I watch this film, something, a scene is just drawn to me, or it just had me just thinking of a different perspective. And then one thing that I can say that this process has taught me is to really just slow down. Currently, I'm doing work in the cannabis industry, and I launched a campaign that's called Free My Weed Man. And the old me would have just jumped right in and just created this business. But now I'm just, studying, the war on drugs. And I went back to school for my master's in cannabis science and business. But really just slowing down and just not acting out of like survivor mode. And that's what I'm so used to doing, as opposed to how can I create something that can sustain me and my community as well while I build it. So that's currently what I'm doing. Thank you.
Also, Nave just turned 18.
Yes.
Doing great. He wish he could be here.
Yeah, and he wants me to let everyone know at every screening that I am Saudi. He got straight A's. He's doing so well. But yeah, he's 18, and he just turned 18 March 16th, and I just was like, just so worried, he's 18, he'll have more freedom, and I was like scared. So I had set him down, and then I said, listen, you don't have to ever leave my house. You can stay here as long as you want. You could be 30 years old and stay here. And he's like, where's all this coming from? But it was really just that panic. I grew up, my mom was like, you're 18? All right, you got to go. And not that she like kicked me out, but I went off to college and I never went back home. But like really just reassuring to him, like, it's no rush. You can stay with me as long as you want. But he's doing so well. He's just so respectful. He's working at Chick-fil-A. But yeah, I'm very proud.
The film, we've been touring with it, and it's events like these, but also starting to think, as we were talking about, like, this is about families, and whether you're talking about, the foster care system or the carceral system, like, there are so many families like Kristal, different shapes, different sizes, people able to, like, be there or more absent, but remembering that like this is about love, it's about trying to stay together, and it's about all the ways that keep you apart. And so we hope that people will keep seeing it and keep watching it and keep supporting the people who are doing the work on the front lines, making change, pushing for change in communities, supporting families, because families need support in order to support the people inside, And it's often if a family doesn't have support that they break down for the people inside. And then, as you say, like, you're alone. And even Kristal has people in her family that she reconnected with later, but they spent a lot of years alone inside. And as you said, moved to different states, left, And so how I think no matter if you have people inside or people inside or you're disconnected, like how you support the communities who are supporting is going to make a change.
And we do, just to promote the film, we do have an Instagram, A Woman on the Outside Film, where we post updates. And yeah, if you think that there's an organization or a community that should watch the film, please reach out either through the Instagram, or we have a website and an email. You can get our contact from anybody here, and that it's possible to have the film screen, host your own screening or buy a license for a library or a school or something like that. So yeah, if the film touched you, share it with somebody else who might also be touched. And yeah, hopefully it will have wider distribution, in the not too distant future. So.
And could you two just, like, on a parting, just tell people how they could get involved or learn more about your organization?
Yeah, I would say get involved with RAPP, but I want to just say, like, I want to forego that and say support families, support, especially women like Jolene and Kristal, who are, I'm noticing in my work, a very underrepresented and undersupported, very integral and important part of ending mass incarceration, because if we're going to end it, we have to not just attack the carceral system, but we have to support, as was said, the families. So, what you can do locally is just plug into an organization that does outreach to directly impacted families. those types of organizations. Not the ones that talk about it and don't have them in there, but the ones that have them in there and centralize them there in their work, help them. Figure out what you can do with them, even if it's just coming to volunteer for a day, whatever it is that's in your capacity to do, but do that. And that could make a difference.
Yeah, like, I double back on what Jose said. Like, we could sit here and talk about the legislative teams that we work with all day. But where I started was that, I started in food pantry lines, and I started in mass distribution lines. So those were the first people I went and volunteered with. I went back to the same organizations that helped me when I was down, and I went and volunteered with them, and I met with them, and I helped their people, and I supported their communities that they were, because I was part of the community they had once supported. So that's where I started, and then after that I met more people that were working with them and met some of their board members, and just get out there and talk to people, talk to your community, and find out what their issues are, because there's plenty, and we're the ones that are gonna come up with the solutions. It's not gonna be your legislators, it's not gonna be your council people or your mayors. We bring them the issues, and they figure out a way amongst their power structure to solve it. But we have to tell them what the problems are. We have to tell them our stories. We have to bring it to their front door, not once, not twice, but every single day until they're annoyed with us, because that's how we get answers from them. That's how we get them to move. We are way more powerful than we give ourselves credit for.
I feel like maybe that's a good place to end. Yeah. On the power. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our panelists for being here. Thank you to all of you. I do just want to take a brief moment to mention the folks who made this all possible in addition to our panelists. So tonight was made possible with support from RPI's School of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences through the IER Presents program, which is a collaboration with NISCA. Also, our co-presenting organizations, RAPP, who we heard from here today, Prisoners Legal Services of New York, the Center for Law and Justice and Capital Area Against Mass Incarceration. There are some tables over to the side here with information about some of these organizations. So if you are feeling moved to get involved, please go check that out and take some information. Also on your seats here today is our season schedule for the spring. So please come back often and join us for future events here at the sanctuary. So thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having us. This is a really special night.